Hi, I wanted to do a short video describing, well, just as a brief demonstration showing some of the things that some of these devices like Google and Alexa can do for language learning. And I've been recently playing a lot with the Google Home device, and it can speak French, German, Italian, Korean, and Japanese, and it can also give you translations for some other languages like Vietnamese. It can't speak to you in those languages yet or understand them, but it can do some translating. It said it's working on Chinese, so I expect that will appear in the future. But I've just been, I'm familiar with playing with it in English, and I've been just trying to use some of the same questions and things that I use in English for that. And it'll do many of the same things in different languages, but sometimes it's some of the more advanced features are still beyond it in other languages, but I think it's a continually evolving thing. So just for instance, hey Google, how do you say I'm going to Spain next week in Spanish?
Me voy a España la próxima semana.
Hey Google, how do you say I'm going to Paris next week in French?
Je vais à Paris la semaine prochaine.
Hey Google, how do you say I'm going to Berlin next week in German?
Ich gehe nächste Woche nach Berlin.
Hey Google, how do you say I'm going to Rome next week in Italian?
Vado a Stanza la prossima settimana.
Hey Google, how do you say I'm going to Vietnam next week in Vietnamese?
Tôi sẽ đến Việt Nam vào tuần tới.
Hey Google, how do you say I'm going to Japan next week in Japanese?
私は来週日本に行きます。
Hey Google, how do you say I'm going to Seoul, Korea next week in Korean?
나는 다음 주에 서울에 갈 거야.
So that's some of the things you can do, and you can play games and such with Google Home too as well, and in different languages that it's programmed to do. Or Vietnamese isn't on the list yet, but you could ask for words. It's even offered to translate Chinese words for me sometimes, though it seems like a work in progress. I wouldn't call it reliable for Chinese. But then, all right, there's other devices like Google, not Google, but Amazon Alexa. This is the small version of the Alexa show. Alexa?
Sorry.
Now, it's got a screen so it can show you things. Alexa, how do you say I'm going to Spain next week in Spanish?
I'm going to Spain next week. In Spanish is Me voy a España la próxima semana.
Alexa, how do you say I'm going to Germany next week in German?
I'm going to Germany next week. In German is Ich fahre nächste Woche nach Deutschland.
Hey Google, or not Google, sorry Google, never mind. Alexa,
I don't understand.
how do you say I'm going to
You can
Paris?
always send feedback through the help and feedback section of the
Sorry,
Alexa.
I don't understand.
Hey Google, stop. Alexa, how do you say I'm going to Paris next week in French?
I'm going to Paris next week. In French is Je vais à Paris la semaine prochaine.
Alexa, how do you say I'm going to Moscow next week in Russian?
I'm going to Moscow next week. In Russian is Я иду в Москву на следующей неделе.
Hey Google. Oh, sorry. Never mind, Google. Stop.
Sure, let's move on.
Stop. Alexa, how do you say I'm going to North Korea next week in Korean?
I'm going to North Korea next week. In Korean is.
다음 주에 북한에 갈 거야.
Alexa, how do you say I'm going to Tokyo next week in Japanese?
I'm going to Tokyo next week. In Japanese is.
来週東京に行きます。
Alexa, how do you say I'm going to Beijing next week in Chinese?
I'm going to Beijing next week. In Chinese is.
我下周要去北京。
So you see, Alexa's got a lot of languages she can translate for you, and words or short phrases. So when you're working on a language and you want to look something up quickly and you want to see how it's spelled, but you don't want to stop what you're doing and look up an app or a computer thing, you can just ask by voice and she'll give it to you. So that can be useful. And I think if the Google device ever comes out with a screen or can work with a screen, it could equally be useful. The thing about Alexa is right now that the only languages she can speak to you in are English and German, and she might come up with Amazon might figure out how to do other languages for it later, but not right now. So that's the state of things as they are, but it's constantly evolving. I've just watched these things get better and better, so I think for language learning purposes, they're useful right now, and they're just going to get more useful as time goes on. So I just wanted to share that with you all. It's been very interesting in the Add One Challenge watching all the different languages people are studying, and well, I just thought you might find this interesting. Hope you did. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.